Who really commands the battlefield? We like to imagine it is the actors on the field itself. Brave men and women standing up for their cause, holding ground or taking it depending on how virtuous they are. That is whether they drive tanks, stand in trenches, or move through city blocks. Or in the future, sit behind the armored cockpit of a battle mech. But the reality is perhaps something quite different. These are romanticized views of what we would like to be true. But what if this was all just self-deception, and the battles were in fact determined by things far away from the field itself? Not just including logistics, that is. It doesn't sit on the front lines, unless there is a total debacle. It does not ride forward through enemy fortifications like tanks or battle mechs, but it does shatter them. In this video, I will be covering one of the most terrible things to scourge a battlefield: a defiant fortification, or even those who resist a superior military force. Today, we will be covering the Long Tom Mobile Artillery Piece. In ancient times, artillery took on the form of the ballista, catapult, or trebuchet. As we ourselves advanced, so did these machines. Instead of relying on wood, rope, and pulleys, they would come to rely on chemical reactions, iron, and fire. With time, this system would evolve yet further, turning into the vicious guns that fired on the fields of the Great War, before turning into the artillery we most recognize today, in the Second World War. From there it has evolved further, but the general shape and function has changed little, especially with the advent of self-propelled artillery. In the world of Battletech, the mechanism of gun-based artillery has not yet disappeared, though perhaps field guns and other self-propelled artillery are a bit more of a niche than they were before. If I can be frank, part of this is due to warfare becoming increasingly mobile and chaotic with the advent of the battle mech, but also because realistically, the world of Battletech needs exciting battles for players to read into and to play out. The storylines would be much less exciting if it was devolved into just a series of miserable artillery duels, followed by short, violent breakthroughs. But even with all of that said, there still is one particular artillery piece in the setting, which brings the true power of artillery to bear on the battlefield. It is a weapon that single-handedly outdoes targets in ways which are reflected by the gods of war in real life. Fortresses crumble before its 30-ton cannon. Any fixed positions are annihilated. Even slower-moving battle mechs, or super heavies, are not free from the tyranny of it. The mobile Long Tom artillery system is one of the most dangerous and devastating pieces to ever be introduced into the setting. First built by the Star League Defense Forces, and modified slightly per era depending on the needs of those building or replacing it, the Long Tom, as it is often simply referred to, is a peerless weapon piece seemingly to behold when delivering vicious, off-field bombardments. It's not a direct combat vehicle, but it brings invaluable power to the theater it operates in. The main gun itself, the Armstrong Long Tom, would be used to great effect against the Taurian Concordat during the Reunification Wars, which would have defensive advantages against the SLDF's attacking forces. This was mitigated and then annihilated with the arrival of these guns, blasting apart fortifications and other defensive positions, as well as delivering unbelievably effective counter-battery fire. A few years after the war, the gun would be married to a mobile chassis for the first time, allowing for the gun to set up, fire, and take to moving only a few seconds after firing. From this point on, the heavy artillery of the SLDF was almost always delivered by this immense construct. It would change slightly in appearance, and in terms of small bits and pieces over the coming centuries. But functionally, the core design of the Long Tom system stayed the same. Large, mobile platforms. Enormous Long Tom cannon. Support trailers with additional ammunition or targeting equipment. limited armor, and limited close-range weaponry. It would be built and replicated by many, even in the centuries that followed the collapse of the Star League, and it would be the only significant heavy artillery system of the Succession Wars. But it, much like the war itself, seemed almost unchanging. Smaller guns made up the bulk of artillery forces across the Inner Sphere as well, but these guns throughout most eras pale in comparison to this enormous long-range cannon. The proliferation of Aero 4 systems would be a challenge to the system overall in some ways, but even then, when a heavily fortified position is holding up an advance, or counter-battery fire is needed, any commander's preference would be for the Long-Tom artillery system. When its enormous cannon fires, whatever is on the other side is utterly devastated. There is no recourse, beyond counter-battery fire or daring raids and assaults, that will silence this horn of doom when it begins to play its song. The CCAF in particular has a history, tactically, of using massed artillery batteries, as it has struggled for much of its history to acquire a large, mobile, powerful mech force. Artillery batteries are also particularly helpful on the defensive as well, something which the Capellans are more known for. The Long Tom within its formations are typically reserved for elite units as a result. They would be used to enormous effect throughout the restoration of the Capellan Confederation under Lao Sanzu, and into the Dark Age, with artillery notably being used to break the back of the armed forces of the Federated Sons in the Battle of Almacht in 3144. Artillery itself, from the CCAF, would eventually be noteworthy in bringing down Julian Davion's Templar III and nearly killing the First Prince. Funnily enough, during the Succession Wars, on the planet of Barrison, the Free Worlds League and the Capellan Confederation would engage in a brutal campaign, but both sides would deploy one of the legendary Long Tom systems. The Capellans, being the defenders, would attempt to knock out the Free Worlds League's gun with counter-battery fire, but eventually this devolved in the two systems only searching and attempting to destroy one another for weeks. This cat-and-mouse game, with both sides trying to find and destroy the other, would only come to an end when military intelligence assets from the Free Worlds League would sabotage their Capellan counterparts, making their gun useless, and giving the attackers the opportunity to unleash their artillery freely. The capital of the planet would fall shortly after, and the Free Worlds League would lay claim to victory. Long Toms have also been used by the Inner Sphere to great effect against the clans, who view it with a degree of disdain. Clan military doctrines have always placed battle mechs at the head of all combat, barring exceptions like Clan Snowraven and to a lesser extent Clan Hell's Horses. Mobile mech strike forces comprised of omnimechs are seen as being strategically too fast to be bogged down, and can be used to strike artillery positions before they become a true threat. From the time of the clan invasion to the Ilclan era, lessons are routinely learned by these genetically engineered warriors that artillery, when employed correctly, will shatter even these impressive clan war machines, and their vital positions or assets. Whether it be the shelling of their dropships and the killing of most of their warriors and mechs inside, as what happened on Guyana, when the Wolf's Dragoons raided the planet in order to strike at the heart of the Wolf Empire in revenge for Alaric's behavior on Terra, or it be the fate of Malvina's Jade Falcons, arrogantly landing dropships in a region with heavy artillery capabilities, with the big guns shredding the arrogant, when they don't accept the value of these historically wildly effective machines. The Long Tom's time in the Inner Sphere does not appear to be waning anytime soon. The Long Tom mobile platform takes on many different appearances and variances, but they all functionally do the same thing. Each are built around a single, large cannon, but beyond this they vary in terms of how heavy the platform that carries them are, and tweak a few of the smaller features. Even in terms of weight, it's not exactly consistent, as they range from 55 to 75 tons, and they once again vary in terms of numbers of trailers that are attached to it, which provide it with support. The average weight depicted in most of the technical readouts, though, is 65 tons. Beyond this, models are all very similar. I'm going to be covering one this time around, because frankly it will be extremely tedious and without much point to go into the details of how one has 3.5 tons of ferro fibers armor, and another may have 4 tons of standard plating. They functionally have the same equipment, just with small tweaks. Due to this, its internal frame can vary as well, as can other features, even going as far as its engine size. The latest variant of the LT-MOB is the 25F, as depicted in Ilclan Recognition Guide 28. It has an internal structure weight of 6.5 tons and doesn't possess any heatsinks. It has standard control equipment on board to operate the train. It possesses the Ammunition Trailer's Advanced Rules, as found in Tactical Operations Advanced Rules. These trailers provide the Long Tom with a series of features depending on how they are outfit, but most commonly they have additional ammunition on board. Alternatively, some can possess advanced targeting equipment, drone command centers, or a loading rig, or communications equipment. The engine found on the LT-MOB-25F is a 16-ton Roble 195 internal combustion engine, giving it a maximum speed of 54 km per hour when not burdened by additional trailers. This is 5 movement points in the tabletop game. When further taxed with trailers, it will slow to 34 km per hour, or 3 movement points overall. This is fine, given that the Long Tom system isn't meant to be fast, mobile, or agile as a machine on the front lines. It is mostly meant to fire and reposition. While yes, it is a military vehicle, it is not of the kind that should be seeing action anywhere near the front lines. If it needs to survive, speed is not going to save it regardless. Its defensive systems are, in a word, meek. The LT-MOB has 3.5 tons of ferro fibers plating, as mentioned prior, giving it 62 points of protection, which is extremely poor, especially for a slow-moving machine. Again, it's not really meant to be facing down enemy mechs or tanks, and it is meant to be out of sight, providing indirect fire support. Additionally, it has 4 machine guns on board in order to dissuade enemy infantry assaults and ambushes on the vehicle. But now, we get to the main course. The whole reason for the existence of any Long Tom platform. It comes equipped with a front-mounted Long Tom cannon, which weighs 30 tons. This enormous cannon can fire a shocking 30 map sheets. Yes, that's right, it doesn't fire 30 hexes, no, it fires 30 map sheets. It is the longest firing weapon in the game, which isn't a cruise missile. When using conventional ammunition, the Long Tom delivers a shocking 25 damage from a direct hit. It can be equipped with alternative ammunitions as well. When facing down enemies and providing support from a relatively safe, but close distance, the Long Tom can be effective at leveling fortifications, city blocks, and slow-moving vehicles or mech targets. It is also a complete nightmare for non-mounted infantry to deal with, who may often be too slow to escape the enormous blasts which will be delivered in either high-explosive form, or when it is firing anti-personnel rounds. It can direct fire with a line of sight as well within 17 hexes, but it will suffer severe penalties for attempting to do so. Again though, if the platform is defending itself this way, something has gone critically wrong. Damage from standard rounds explode outwards, with the impact hex taking full damage, but hexes nearby also taking lower levels of damage as a result. As if that weren't enough, the Long Tom can be deployed with tactical, nuclear-tipped artillery shells. Yes, in the right environment and deployed by the right faction, or in the right scenario, the Long Tom may deliver more than just an enormous high-explosive round. It may deliver the splitting of the atom, and a catastrophic nuclear blast. The gun is the Long Tom, and the entire rest of the platform exists solely to support that one component. The Long Tom most often is going to be an off-field asset. In many cases, it's not going to appear on the tabletop, and instead will just be called in from far away. The reason is, the stats aren't meant for high-intensity engagements, or even low-intensity engagements even. It is too fragile for those kinds of fights. and they do nothing to support its enormous cannon, which suffers when direct firing regardless. But that doesn't mean it might not appear as a scenario item, a piece to defend in a desperate battle in the right campaign, or during an event played out on the tabletop. In-universe, if it's fighting on the front lines, well, its crews will be remembered fondly by their families, I'm sure. Just like their enemies, because when deployed without harassment, they too will be remembered fondly as well, I'm sure. Because when the big gun speaks, the world trembles. The mobile Long Tom system is one of the best artillery pieces to support any campaign in the history of the setting. Whether it be under the Great Houses, a mercenary unit, or a periphery state, its firepower is hard to ignore for any defender, or attacker, when it is deployed to any theater. Inevitably, the ability to lob shells across countless kilometers to a target, and being able to rapidly redeploy, is an enormous boon for the system as a whole. The Long Tom is ideally a killer who is heard, but never seen. But its power is unmistakable and awesome. A muzzle flash in the distance is perhaps all that will be noticed by the eye, with a terrible boom echoing out, gradually becoming ever duller as it travels through the air. Only when it has struck, with the sound of another terrible blast, can the results of its fury be seen. Mechs and their pilots may be laid bare. Infantry are killed by the shockwave, let alone from the carnage that the shrapnel will deliver from the blast. Tanks are torn to pieces. Walls crumble. Trenches are turned into craters. And buildings collapse into ruins. What is even more terrifying is when this gun, a gun which can bring down any human construct, is not alone. When it comes in a full battery, when a half dozen of these 30-ton cannons begin playing as an orchestra of destruction across the front, they leave behind only misery and the defeated. Massed artillery does indeed still have a place in Battletech. Specialized, heavy guns still have a place in Battletech. Just because battle mechs feel immune to it, and commanders have not wholly embraced it, does not mean those who face this tactic are safe. At the very least, when the Long Tom fires, whoever is on the other side of its wrath is by no means protected.
Look on the bright side, kid. You get to keep all the money.
Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this video on the ever-infamous Long Tom, it will be a part of the upcoming Mercenaries Kickstarter that is being launched by Catalyst Game Labs, meaning that plastic models for this monster are going to begin making their way into the play space. And that's extremely exciting. Even though I'll never be fielding a full battery, just for the imagery of it, I'm going to be getting a full battery of them, I suspect. But that's just me. I'll leave a link in the description of the video if you're interested in checking out the official backer kit page. The Kickstarter is going to be going live on March 23rd, 2023, so we're only about a week away from the making of this video. Beyond that though, if you've enjoyed this video, have you considered liking it and subscribing to the channel? I post content quite frequently and I think you'll be happy with it. Also, if you want to support this channel further, have you considered becoming a YouTube channel member? When you hit the join button, you will allow me to operate this channel the way I do, and I'm always grateful for this support. I really mean it when I say that this channel is really only possible because of viewers like you. And with that, I will catch all of you in the comment section below.